Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are continuing a discussion of Canto 3, and this is chapter 21. So the previous two sessions, we concentrated on chapter 20. I was in fact planning to offer the verses of chapter 20. In other words, elaborate on the discussion. But then I figured that whatever was shared in the past two sessions was adequate, and it would be a summary which one could use. And I thought it would be better for us to move on to the next chapter. It will be more productive for us to move on to the next chapter. Now, what is very important for us to realize is this shift in Srimad Bhagavatam that occurs in the third canto. Right up to now, for most part, we were discussing the coming together of Diti and Kashyapa Muni at an inappropriate time. And then their own consciousness was impacted by anger on behalf of Kashyapa Muni. And in her case, she was in a weakened state in that particular time. And then because of such a union, we find that the progeny who practically could come into the womb of Mother Diti were demoniac. So there were several events that were transpiring. There was an event where Diti is afflicted by lust, and she wants union with Kashyapa Muni. And then Kashyapa Muni is being disturbed in his activity of his evening Sandhya puja, the Agnihotra that is normally done. So it is very traditional. If you were to ever experience this in some parts of India, in southern parts of India, I grew up with people who used to offer fire into the sacrifice, 3 times of a day, in the morning, afternoon, and evening. So this is very common in certain parts of India. And what used to happen is that is a particular time when you are preparing for a certain shift in consciousness. And as a consequence, there's the invocation of the Lord, and then there's activity which is performed, which is highly auspicious, so that the shift itself, which is the junction of time from between one junction to another, it becomes extraordinarily productive in being able to serve the Lord. Now, we find that Mother Diti being afflicted, she enrages Kashyapa Muni because he tries to pacify her by words and praising her, etc. And she's not ready to accept his logic and accept his words. So he appears to be quite agitated from the perspective that the outcome of such a union would be inauspicious because it would practically set the stage for some kind of devastation to come upon the world. So being a Prajapati, Kashyapa Muni being a progenitor, original progenitor from Lord Brahma, he was quite disturbed mentally. So there was a lot of anger from the husband's side. The anger from the husband's side and the wife not being in proper consciousness during the Garbha Adana Samskara practically created the karmic circumstances that would allow for the entry of souls of a very low consciousness. Essentially, we spoke about it in the previous session as well, that almost all of the population in the world, almost all, and I'm leaving a little room so that no one claims that, I've just included everybody. Almost all of the world, and all of the population in the world, is in reality, they're manifesting subtle and physical bodies that are being created out of lust. So when subtle and physical bodies are manifested out of lust, then those bodies themselves are very easily vulnerable, and they're very easily afflicted by the same factor, which is how they were created. So the objective practically creates a certain environment for that poor quality of lust to form. So from the perspective of starting with a disadvantage, the world is starting with a clear disadvantage because there are all kinds of inauspicious circumstances which are practically in play when such union takes place. And then in many cases, there are many mental issues that the children observe because there's a lot of friction between the parents, and there's a lot of challenges which they face as well. But more than that, there's also the whole concept that the body and the subtle body, they have been created in lust. So because they have been created in lust, they become vulnerable, more vulnerable than if it were to be created in sattva, were to be created with a specific, what I would call as objective. So this is being observed overall around the world. Now, what we do see is that in the previous sessions, we find that there is this particular phenomenon of being afflicted, and the discussion centers around the progeny, which is Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, who are born out of such a union. And then there is the manifestation of Lord Varaha, who appears, and then he destroys Hiranyaksha, and then Lord Narasimhadev appears to destroy Hiranyakashipu. But even though all this devastation takes place, there's wonderful katha which forms around, which is very purifying in both Lord Varaha's appearance and Lord Narasimha's appearance. But the point we want to make here is, now in this particular chapter, there's a shift. The shift that is occurring now is where the questions asked by Sri Vidura to Maitreya Rishi start with the whole topic of union between the sons of Lord Brahma, which is the children of Lord Brahma, to produce progeny. He's particularly interested in knowing how these great personalities engaged in this act, which is considered to be extraordinarily sensitive. It is considered to be extraordinarily sensitive because it can cause devastation, and it can also cause great auspiciousness to come upon the world. So you have this question and answer session in Srimad Bhagavatam in the third canto, very specifically shifting from inauspicious union to what happens when there is auspicious union. So there was this whole topic of inauspicious union for several chapters between Mother Diti and Kashyapa Muni, because of which Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu come forth. And now there is this discussion about auspicious union to produce progeny who are supposed to benefit the entire creation. So this particular discussion, there's a direct shift here. It is quite interesting that Srimad Bhagavatam particularly is dealing with it in this particular area. And they're dealing with this topic because it just shows how much importance is being given. It is basically being demonstrated as to how much importance is being given to this whole concept of, union between husband and wife, and the whole concept of the use of sexual energy and the use of the knowledge that is being provided and the responsibility of those coming together, because they're playing a role in bringing forth progeny who can either benefit or compromise the circumstance of the world. So it's quite interesting to see how this particular shift occurs in this chapter. And what is also very interesting to see in this chapter is the fact that the main personalities are Sri Kardama Muni and Mother Devahuti. Now, what is interesting is Kardama Muni, he was asked to marry and produce progeny. And when he was asked to marry and produce progeny, the normal tendency would be to start looking for a partner. Now, he does the opposite. What he does is that he goes away to the forest and he engages in penance of purification. He engages in purification for the purpose of being able to practically engage in the duty that he's being asked to without compromising the main goal which he's been asked to perform, which is practically as an individual wanting to pursue transcendental consciousness. So there's a shift here which occurs, which is actually starting with Kardama Muni and Mother Devahuti. It's a phenomenal exchange because these two personalities come from completely opposite backgrounds with natures that are opposite. And Kardama Muni is an ascetic. He is extraordinarily austere, and his surroundings are austere. His partner Devahuti, Mother Devahuti, she comes as a princess. She is the daughter of a king and the king of the universe, not an ordinary king. She is the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu himself. So she is practically I would say she belongs to the first family of the entire creation in that sense. And she is practically coming together and then staying and then putting up and then basically adjusting to the austere nature of the existence of Kardama Muni. And he practically also recognizes where she comes from and he's trying to create facility. So it's a This exchange is also a very powerful exchange in terms of understanding the dynamics of people of completely opposite natures who can come together. And if there is a mood of service, then they do have the ability to make adjustments. They have the ability to be able to move forward if there is a proper mode of service. Even though the external environment is opposite, the nature is quite different. The circumstances and how they have grown up is very, very different. They're still able to come together and bring about great auspicious change. Now, what is interesting, as we spoke earlier, is that Kardama Muni goes away to the forest. He does not look for a girl. He actually goes away to the forest. And what does he do? He's practically engaging in the process of yoga, of wanting to have an audience with the Lord of the heart, so that he could practically arrange for everything through the blessings of the Lord. So why is this so important? Is because it's practically a demonstration of the principle that if Krishna himself gets involved in arranging things for us, then those aspects of what he is arranging will never disturb us in Krishna consciousness. What disturbs us in Krishna consciousness is not so much what is being arranged. It is not what is being arranged. It is how it's being arranged. If Krishna is arranging for a circumstance in life, then that circumstance does not interfere with the prospect of Krishna consciousness. So this is being demonstrated where there is complete surrender on Kardama Muni's side. He knows he has to engage in the Grahasthashram. He is being asked to engage in the Grahasthashram. He does not know what to do because he does not want to compromise his spiritual life. So he goes in a search of dependence to the Lord. He sits down and he is meditating, and he follows the Ashtanga yoga process of very deep meditation. At one point, he has samadhi, where he is particularly engaging in the direct darshan of Krishna, when he receives all kinds of instructions on the fact that because of his sacrifice and his dependence on Krishna, Krishna himself is arranging a girl for him. So it's quite extraordinary when you read this particular chapter to find that there's such personal involvement of the Lord. He's not only arranging for Devahuti and Kardama Muni to come together, he also arranges for himself to be born as a son, which is the greatest auspiciousness ever. But then why did this begin? This began because even though Kardama Muni was asked to perform an activity which one would consider would be extraordinarily entangling from the perspective of material life, it is the most entangling process. If you're entering into the Grahasthashram, and the whole concept of Grahasthashram is such that there can be a lot of entanglement. And someone of his nature who is already very goal-oriented, he is goal-oriented because he has capacity for tapasya. He can sit for 5,000 years, 10,000 years. In that yuga, because of the lifespan, 5,000-10,000 years wasn't much. So they could sit for 5,000-10,000 years. And in that particular yuga, he had the capacity for tapasya. And he sits down and he's performing tapasya in such a way that he does not get, he basically does not make a decision which can impede his progress. So he has a lot of capacity for this. And at the same time, he's wanting to depend on Krishna in that particular capacity. So he's practically taking advantage of his spiritual situation. And then he is using the spiritual situation to arrange for facilities to perform his service. So this is particularly wonderful because this is dependence. So the principle of dependence comes forth. And because someone is dependent, there's reciprocation from the Lord. And this reciprocation itself is so wonderful that the beneficiary of reciprocation is the whole universe. It is the whole creation, because Lord Kapila appears. Krishna, which is Lord Vishnu, who appears before Kardama Muni, he then appears as Kapila Muni. And then he practically gives instructions on Sankhya Yoga. And it is a very wonderful, extraordinarily auspicious turn of events. But this took a focus. There was a goal. The goal should not have been detracted. You see, there was absolutely no question of being detracted from the goal. So he was asked to do something. And this was extraordinary because he is a tapasvi. And a tapasvi is being asked to be a progenitor, practically bring forth progeny, which means he has to enter into the Grahasthashram. When he's being asked to enter into the Grahasthashram, he practically sees this particular event of changing and shifting ashram could potentially influence his ultimate goal of being able to go back to Godhead. And as a consequence, he is using his own process to bring forth and make an arrangement for himself to ensure that his ultimate goal is not impeded. And the process described here is of Ashtanga Yoga. Now, Ashtanga Yoga is particularly, I would say, it has principles of purification of the senses. So there has to be purification of the subtle body. The subtle body itself is composed of the chakras. We all have heard of the different chakras in the body. You have the Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipuraka, Anahata, and then you have the Vishuddhi, Agya, and Sahasrara. So you have consciousness from the root of the spine progressing upward all the way up to the top of the spine. You see, this is basically the progression of consciousness. Now, how do you purify consciousness as it progresses from the root all the way to the top? You would need to cleanse each and every energy center. So there is this whole principle of Kriya Yoga. Kriya essentially means that you engage in activity. And by engaging in activity, you purify the nerve centers, you purify the very specific energy centers. And by purifying such centers, you also affect the desires that can develop, because the greater the level of tamas, greater the possibility that we may develop desires and go in the direction of the tamas. So in reality, the objective of Ashtanga Yoga is to cleanse the energy centers, to cleanse the areas of the subtle body, and eventually reach perfect control with which they could concentrate, which is the dhyana part, dharana, and then dharana could result in dhyana, which is meditation, and dhyana could result in samadhi. So the first step is yama. They have to follow all kinds of rules. Yama essentially means to follow rules and regulations. You could include the aspects of morality, the basic morality of, do not lie and do not cheat and do not steal and do not, engage in violence, etc. These are basic aspects of morality. And then you have niyama, which is specific to the process that they are a part of. Niyama means rules and regulations that are a part of what they need to do for them to be able to make progress in that particular path. And then you have asana, right? Asana essentially is the Hatha Yoga asana that we come across. So we see Hatha Yoga being performed all over the world. And this is just one part of the Ashtanga Yoga process, which are 8 steps. This is the 3rd step. Once one is an adept in asana, the advantage of the yogi who is adept in asana is for them to be able to capture consciousness between a particular junction to another. So there are 2 junctions. There is the junction of the Muladhara, which is the root of the spine, and then there is the junction of the Swadhisthana. The yogi who is expert in Ashtanga Yoga and Hatha Yoga, they will have the ability to create some kind of a dam, just like a dam holds water. They have the ability to stop consciousness in that particular area between these 2 nerve centers, between these 2 chakras, and they would have the ability to cleanse that area of all kinds of inebrities. Now, the Hatha Yoga process allows them to place what we would call bandhas. Bandha essentially is a muscular stop. It stops between one and the other. It's actually like building a wall between 2 different chakras, then purifying that area and then moving up ahead. Now, interestingly, there are chakras in the bottom of the body. The lowest part is the Muladhara. In the middle, you have the Manipuraka. Our principle, and in general, all kinds of spiritual processes, there is this whole idea of wanting to be able to what we would call as the principle of wanting to abstain from anything which is tamasic, and that includes the use of onion, garlic. And the reason why is because as the energy centers in the lower part of the body, if you were to put anything which is tamasic in the intestines, if you were to put anything which is tamasic in the abdominal region, the energy which is flowing from the bottom to the top will get captured right there. It will stop. Tamas has a tendency to stagnate. Tamas has a tendency to stop things. It would just stop right at the particular spot where it would not be able to progress further. So the main reason why we don't encourage the use of onion, garlic, we don't encourage the use of any kind of violent means to arrange for food, such as arranging for food which has, for example, meat and so many other things which are not supposed to be had. And so is the case with any kind of alcohol, any kind of intoxicant. It can practically stop the flow of consciousness, and consciousness can become dormant in the lower part of the body, where it would not be able to rise higher. And then because it becomes dormant, then people would start developing habits that are of a lower nature because it's becoming dormant. So we would want to understand that there's a very technical aspect to this. And this technical aspect is covered in the Kriya Yoga aspect. They basically do all the aspects of Kriya where they cleanse this, which is not our objective. Our objective in Krishna consciousness is not so much to engage in Hatha Yoga. Our objective is not so much to clear the obstacles in different chakras. We don't want to go into such deep levels of technicality because that is not required. Our acharyas, the Vaishnava acharyas, though we are fully aware, because the Bhagavatam in several sections does speak of the chakras, they do talk about the different nerve centers, etc. However, we are not focused on the process of Kriya to cleanse the chakras. What do? We practically take up the chanting of Harinam. We take up the worship of Krishna. We take up, visiting the Dham. We come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. And as a consequence, there's purification of the subtle body that occurs by coming in touch with Krishna. It's a very powerful process because it is dependent on mercy. Whilst the Ashtanga Yoga process, which is being followed, which is also Kriya Yoga, falls in the same category, is dependent on effort. So there is a whole objective of putting in a lot of effort and then ascending. So that is an ascending process. You're ascending from the bottom to the top. In our particular circumstance, ours is a descending process where mercy is coming down from the top, from the parampara. And then we are receiving the mercy. And because of the mercy, we are getting purified. Very powerfully, it is said that someone can become a Uttamadhikari Vaishnava. Someone can become a Uttamadhikari Vaishnava even if they are not adept in Shastric conclusions. They may not be adept in Sanskrit. They may not be adept in Shastric conclusions. They may not understand what I would call as, be able to present arguments in front of an opposite party for them to be able to convince them of the merits of our system. They may not be able to have all these expertise, but they can become a Uttamadhikari Prema Bhakta. They can become a Bhava Bhakta, Prema Bhakta. All of this simply because they are simple enough to accept the Guru into their heart. They are simple enough to accept the Guru into their heart, where the Guru, if he's accepted into the heart, he has the ability to be able to instruct and to impart all kinds of opulence on the disciple, including prema. So the combination of having extraordinary knowledge, having the ability to defeat others, having the ability to distribute a philosophy in an efficient, expert way, all these are traits of Vaishnava. There can be pure Madhikari Vaishnavas who don't have this expertise, but who have a nature which is quite simple. They have the ability to step aside and receive mercy in their hearts. So this is a very, very powerful process that we are into, because we are all candidates for Kripa. You see, we don't have the efficiency of sadhana, neither do we have time, neither do we have the expertise of becoming Shastric exponents, where slowly, steadily, we have the ability to absorb Shastra into ourselves and be able to present philosophy. We can't make the claim. We really cannot make the claim. If you were to use this as a technical standard, those days there were scholars who could defeat the opposite school. They could go and defeat a philosophy, and then everybody from that philosophy would become a part of this philosophy. You see, we don't have all that in us. What is it that we're being trained into in our temples? What is it that is being spoken of practically in every class? We're constantly talking about humility. And the whole idea of humility is to be able to step aside so that the Guru can sit in the heart. Step aside and cleanse the heart so that the Guru is accepted into the heart, and the Guru's instructions have the capacity to give us prema. So we can attain a goal which is far, far higher than any goal that has ever been documented in Shastra by the yogis, by the Gyanis. We can attain a goal which is far higher, even more higher than all the Vaikuntha planets where Krishna is Narayana who is practically in an opulent Aishwarya Rupi Rupa, where he is particularly very opulent, we can attain a goal which is even higher in terms of going to the highest planet, which is Goloka, to serve Krishna in his most personal form. We can do all of that with simply having the simplicity to accept the instructions of the Guru. So this is a very powerful process. There's mercy that's flowing down. Having an efficient system to be able to capture mercy is our sadhana. Our whole sadhana has the objective to ultimately be able to step aside so that we can become candidates for Kripa. This is very important for us. We want to make a distinction when we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is not telling us to go to the forest and perform tapasya. The Srimad Bhagavatam is not encouraging kriya. In fact, it is actually Sukadeva Goswami in the second canto particularly is very clear that this is not required. You need devotional service. The yogis also are experiencing rasa. They're experiencing rasa because you start with yama, you go to niyama, you go to the hatha yoga process, and then you learn pranayama. It is the fourth step of Ashtanga yoga. If you do pranayama and if you do all the preceding steps, the fifth step of Ashtanga yoga is pratyahara, where you have the ability to control your senses. So it's pratyahara. Yeah, you have the ability to capture, control your senses. This is the fifth step. Now, in this particular fifth step, once the fifth step is complete, you then have the ability to concentrate because the senses are under control. And because you have the ability to concentrate, which is called dharana, then you have the ability for meditation, which is dhyana. So they sit down. You typically see a yogi sitting down in the lotus position. They have their hands in dhyana, which is the thumb touching the forefinger, and they are sitting down in deep meditation with their eyes partially closed, concentrating on the point of the nose. Now, this whole idea of concentration, dharana, has preceding steps. The preceding step is pratyahara, which is control of senses. Before that, you have pranayama, hatha yoga, yama, niyama, all of this. After dharana is attained, then you have the ability to concentrate and bring the Lord's, the concentrate in the heart region upon the Lord. You see, the soul basically is where the Paramatma resides, and as a consequence, in the heart region, the soul and Paramatma, Atma and Paramatma are together in the region of the heart. So there's a concentration, dharana, there is dhyana, meditation in the region of the heart, and the Lord in his four-armed form as Paramatma manifests himself in the region of the heart. Now, this yogi experiences extraordinary bliss when he reaches a level of consciousness which practically can evoke the presence of the Lord, and he has the ability to see the Lord in this particular region. He experiences bliss which is undescribable, indescribable perhaps. And what we need to understand is that this is considered to be highly partial in terms of rasa, because he cannot interact with Krishna, who appears as Paramatma. He really cannot serve him with his limbs. He cannot really interact with him beyond the fact that he's having a visual and he is practically able to have darshan. So this is considered to be highly partial by our predecessor acharyas. There is rasa, but it is highly partial. The yogic realization is partial. Now, the point being that what we are being given is the full version where we have the ability to practically embrace Krishna. We have the ability to feed him. We have the ability to take what has been eaten by him, touch him. We have the ability basically in our system for us to practically be in proximity so that we can interact with the Lord just as much as we would interact with someone who is just next to us. But we don't have a process which is as strenuous, as difficult as being experienced by the yogis given in Srimad Bhagavatam. So what is this which is being practically bringing us this particular opportunity? It is only Kripa. We are all candidates for Kripa. So it is highly, highly, I would say, confusing if one were to start thinking that they can be qualified to receive what they're receiving in our movement. We should be very careful in understanding the principle of qualification. There is no qualification. Nobody is qualified to receive what they're receiving because what we are being given is far above what others achieve after millions of years of practice. So it is not an ordinary circumstance. So what is it that we ought to do? We have to understand that there is this category, and we simply call it the simple devotee. What is a simple devotee? The simple devotee has the ability to depend on Krishna. They have the ability where in their heart there is no duplicity. They're wanting Krishna and they have the ability to depend on Krishna. They have the ability to depend on sadhu. They have the ability to depend on guru. When they're entering a temple environment, when they're entering into any kind of seva, the only objective is to serve. They have no other objective because their heart is quite simple. It is not complicated with objectives of position, wanting this, wanting that. They don't have other objectives. They don't consider themselves very qualified in the first place. They go there with the objective that, yes, I can serve to the extent I can. I can perhaps wash pots. I can perhaps sweep the floor. I can mop the floor. This is my qualification. This is the definition of a Kripa Siddha. A Kripa Siddha devotee is a simple devotee, but then our scriptures say that even such a devotee who does not have this extraordinary qualification of all kinds of opulences and all kinds of what we would call as qualifications and so on and so forth, has the ability to attain the same fruit as someone who is considered to be super efficient according to our scriptures in terms of being able to present arguments. He is completely knowledgeable in scriptures, has the ability to present logical arguments. He's able to overpower the opponents and so on. So it's fascinating that our system is one which is dependent on mercy. And we need to qualify for mercy. We need to work on ourselves so that we become present for mercy, regardless of what we achieve. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada used to demonstrate this principle. What he used to do was in a meeting where there used to be big managers of very large projects. And then there also used to be one or two devotees who used to come to meet with him when he's visiting a yatra, who would be of a nature of someone who is doing service. In the grand scheme of things, their service would seem to be insignificant from the perspective of the activity itself. What Srila Prabhupada would do is that he would demonstrate the principle of simplicity and the effect of Kripa Siddha, or effect of basically receiving Kripa, by ignoring the big managers and giving audience to this very simple devotee who has come in, who has done some sincere service, even though it may not be like building a temple, it would be some very simple, sincere service. Srila Prabhupada would particularly bring him in and then basically talk to them and then inquire about them. He would practically encourage them in so many different ways. And he was doing this simply to demonstrate the fact that we are Kripa Siddhas. We are dependent on Kripa, and we need to recognize that particular fact. If we don't recognize that, then we could have an objective of wanting to achieve things. And sometimes devotees, when they want to achieve things, there might be a lot of confusion between whether they want to achieve things for the purpose of gratifying themselves or they want to achieve things because of pleasing Krishna. There's a lot of confusion in that. So it is not so much we want to discourage devotees from doing wonderful things, but the objective is so important. So in this particular situation, you find such a powerful personality, Kardama Muni. He is particularly going into the forest and he is engaging in tapasya because he's so afraid of entering into the grahasthashram that he wants to depend on the Lord so that the Lord himself could arrange in such a way that his ultimate objective will not get detracted. So this particular circumstance is so auspicious just to hear that everything is being arranged by Krishna. Krishna practically appears, Vishnu appears. He appears on the back of Garuda. He is giving blessings to Kardama Muni. And then he is also saying, I have arranged for a girl and she will be appearing here in such and such time. Krishna gives a time. And then he also says that once you get married, then I will come as a progeny. And then I will instruct the world through this means. So it's just fascinating how there is a certain dependence. So there is this shift that is occurring, as we spoke earlier, of how inauspiciousness in the beginning can result in inauspiciousness in the end. And here we're talking about how an auspicious beginning, where there's tapasya, there is recognition of responsibility, there's recognition of consequences, and there is an extraordinary dependence on the Lord. It actually results in bringing forth progeny who are extraordinarily remarkable in their contribution. This is Krishna himself who is coming as their child. So this is very, very dramatic, the shift that is occurring in Srimad Bhagavatam. We will go through the verses and we will see where we go with this. I will comment as we go along. This is chapter 20, which is a conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. Sri Shaunaka inquired, O Sutta Goswami, after the earth was again situated in its orbit, what did Swayambhuva Manu do to show the path of liberation to persons who were to take birth later on? Shaunaka Rishi inquired about Vidura, who was a great devotee and friend of Lord Krishna, and who gave up the company of his elder brother because the latter, along with his sons, played tricks against the desires of the Lord. So he rejected Asat Sangha. Vidura was born from the body of Vedavyasa and was not less than he. Thus he accepted the lotus feet of Krishna wholeheartedly and was attached to his devotees. One moment, I'm going back to chapter 20. Pardon me. We're in 21. One moment. I'm just using a phone to reach the particular verse. It's taking a little longer. Yes, sorry. This is a conversation between Manu and Kardama. So this is chapter 21, conversation between Manu and Kardama. Vidura said, the lion of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed. O worshipful sage, I beg you, give me an account of this race whose progeny multiplied through sexual intercourse. The two great sons of Swayambhuva Manu, Priyavrata and Uttanapad, ruled the world consisting of 7 islands, just according to religious principles. O holy Brahmana, O sinless one, you have spoken of his daughter, known by the name Devahuti, as the wife of the sage Kardama, the lord of created beings. How many offspring did the great yogi beget through the princess, who was endowed with 8-fold perfection in the yoga principles? Oh, pray tell me this, for I am eager to hear it. Why is it so important? It's because Kardama Muni was an extraordinary mystic. He was a perfect practitioner of the 8-fold path of mysticism. He had completed his Ashtanga Yoga. He was already situated in Samadhi. Devahuti was also of the same nature. She was also extraordinarily adept in the Ashtanga Yoga process. So she is advanced. The word used here is Yoga Lakshana, and he is called Maha Yogi. Yoga Lakshana is, she is an adept and she completely recognizes the different aspects of yoga. Maha Yogi is where he is practically of a circumstance where his position, if you were to consider Ashtanga yogis, he would be like a, Uttamadhikari. He's one of the greatest yogis. O holy sage, tell me how the worshipful Ruchi and Daksha, the son of Brahma, generated children after securing as their wives the other 2 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu. The great sage Maitreya replied, commanded by Lord Brahma to beget children in the worlds, the worshipful Kardama Muni practiced penance on the bank of river Saraswati for a period of 10,000 years. See, this is fascinating. The same activity is also done by the Prachetas. Prachina Bari, the father, he becomes old and he's telling his sons, I want you to take over the kingdom. I want you to beget children. I want you to rule the world. So instead of actually taking up the responsibility, the first thing which the Prachetas do is they head off into the forest of wanting to engage in transcendental activities. The same situation arises here, is that the moment Lord Brahma commanded Kardama Muni to beget children, he practically began to perform penance. So this is actually an extraordinarily instructive chapter on the principles of Grahasthashram, where there's such responsibility which is being taken up, and they take it so seriously that the activity of even entering into the Grahasthashram requires 10,000 years of penance. So that the whole purpose is for them not to be distracted by the ashram, whilst being able to contribute for the betterment of the service that is being asked of them. So there is a whole system of wanting to depend on Krishna. So he performs penance for 10,000 years to beget progeny. It's fascinating. It's just unbelievable. During the period of penance, the sage Kardama, by worship through devotional service in trance, propitiated the personality of Godhead, who is the quick bestower of all blessings upon those who flee to him for protection. So here, Kardama Muni is being categorized as someone who has sought protection from Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, the worshipable Lord, for the purpose of enacting his duty in the world, and for also ensuring that this duty and the result of the duty are all fully understood by him. He's engaging in penance. And now here they use the word worship through devotional service in trance. So worship and devotional service in trance is basically Ashtanga Yoga. Controlling the senses, right up to Pratyahara, the 5 steps control the senses. Dharana is concentration, dhyana is meditation, and then eventually there is the prospect of samadhi. Samadhi is what they use, samadhi is basically being called devotional service in trance. Then in the Satya Yuga, the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead, being pleased, showed himself to that Kardama Muni and displayed his transcendental form, which can be understood only through the Vedas. Kardama Muni saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is free from material contamination in his eternal form, effulgent like the sun, wearing a garland of white lotuses and water lilies. The Lord was clad in spotless yellow silk, and his lotus face was fringed with slick, dark locks of curly hair. Adorned with a crown and earrings, he held his characteristic conch, disc, and mace in 3 of his hands, and a white lily in the 4th. He glanced about in a happy, smiling mood, whose sight captivates the hearts of all devotees. A golden streak on his chest, the famous Kaustava gem suspended from his neck. He stood in the air with his lotus feet placed on the shoulders of Garuda. When Kardama Muni actually realized the Supreme Personality of Godhead in person, he was greatly satisfied because his transcendental desire was fulfilled. He fell on the ground with his head bowed to offer obeisances unto the lotus feet of the Lord. His heart, naturally full of love of God, with folded hands, he satisfied the Lord with prayers. So it's fascinating to see someone of such great accomplishment, a yogi, which means he has all kinds of accomplishments. He's a Mahayogi. Srimad Bhagavatam is calling him a Mahayogi. He actually had a heart which had the ability to actually depend on Krishna. Normally, if we develop skills, then we don't have the ability to depend on Krishna. In general, there's a certain sense of arrogance that comes into the hearts of those who become skilled, who become proficient, who achieve things, which is natural, damba. You see, this is called demoniac pride. Yeah. Manadena, amani manadena. For us, basically, to have pride would practically crush the prospect of chanting Harinam. So here is someone who is so accomplished that he's considered a Mahayogi. He can practically manifest universes by his process. He's so powerful that he can create entire universes. But he has this heart which is so dependent on Krishna that he actually goes away to the forest in wanting to depend on the Lord for an arrangement which is to be made for engaging in the service of being a progenitor. So this is dependence, which is the primary characteristic of a Vaishnava. Regardless of how powerful they are, the primary characteristic of a Vaishnava is for us to be able to depend on Krishna. So this is being demonstrated by Kardama Muni. So he is just an amazing personality. When we actually read about it, you find that he's very accomplished in what he's doing. He actually has the ability to invoke the presence of the Lord. The Lord appears before him. And such a personality is actually, he is very dependent on him. He's practically going and saying, I can't handle my duties. I need your help. I cannot handle these duties that have been given to me by Lord Brahma. I need your help. So please help me. This takes a lot from a very powerful person. He's like a demigod. He's like a demigod. To have this dependence means, he's a real devotee. He practically can go, sit and meditate, ask for help. And it also shows how much importance they gave and had realizations in being able to interact with material nature directly. In Grihastha Ashram, there's a lot of interaction with material nature. There is a characteristic which is very specific with Grihastha Ashram, is that you don't basically depend on Krishna. There's a lot of planning that goes. People save money. They keep a certain amount of money in the bank. They spend a certain kind of money. They have a lifestyle. So a lot of planning about the future happens in the Grihastha Ashram. So the opportunity for dependence is somewhat limited. This is in comparison to a sadhu who does not know where he is going to get his roti in the morning. He would go from one particular house to another. You see sadhus here in Vrindavan. Different temples have feasts in different particular parts of the month. They would come on those days, and other days they fast. Otherwise, they go begging for 1 or 2 rotis from the Brajavasis. The Brajavasis give them, this is called Madhukari. They go from household to household. The Brajavasis give them roti. This is the only place on the planet. Vraja is the only place on the planet where there would still be a very dignified treatment of those who come and ask for bread. Very dignified treatment. I had the opportunity to go with Dinabandhu Prabhu, His Grace Dinabandhu Prabhu, several years back. He took us on a little tour of Raja. It was a small group, and he also went and then he asked for roti from Brajavasi women who were standing outside that door. It was not arranged. It was not pre-arranged. The moment he asked for roti, they just went inside. They made rotis, they bought some yogurt, and then they were able to give us all of that right then. The point being that this is the only place on the planet where you could ask for bread and you would still be treated well. You would not be treated with indignity. It would not be looked down upon. It is an experience in itself. Now, a sadhu depends on Madhukari. He goes from house to house and he picks up a little here, picks up there, just like a bee would. So there is a certain sense of greater level of dependence on Krishna to arrange all of this. That is not true with the ashram. The Grihastha Ashram, there are constant arrangements and planning. There's agitation if things don't work out well. So as a consequence, the opportunity for dependence is somewhat limited in the Grihastha Ashram. But here, you notice in Kardama Muni's case, he's an extraordinarily powerful Mahayogi. His heart is so soft that he has the ability to actually wanting to depend on Krishna to manage the ashram, essentially to manage the ashram, to be efficient in the ashram so that he could offer good results to the Lord in his service. It's a very fascinating account. You always need to understand context. It is one thing for someone who has nothing to be humble. It is another for someone who is to be extraordinarily powerful to be humble. That humility is worth more than this one. Because if you have nothing, you have really nothing. You're not significant in any which way. Us being humble is not a big deal because it's a natural quality of someone who realizes their position in the world. But how about someone who has the capacity, like a demigod, to practically create a universe? He has such potency. Him becoming humble, humbling himself, and then understanding that the service that's being given to him is not, that easy. That is being a progenitor. So much emphasis was given on doing it properly, which is so much emphasis is given on bringing forth progeny. This is in contrast to what we observe with Mother Diti and Kashyapa Muni. This is in contrast. Now here, there's so much emphasis. He's actually playing a role of a progenitor, so he's going away and engaging in penance. But then this is a penance of dependence. He's practically invoking the presence of the Lord. O Supreme Worshipful Lord, my power of sight is now fulfilled, having attained the greatest perfection of the sight of you, who are the reservoir of all existences. Through many successive births of deep meditation, advanced yogis aspire to see your transcendental form. Yeah, many, many years of deep meditation, 10,000 years, 15,000 years. And here, Srila Prabhupada has just arranged for us to have direct contact with Krishna, and that too within one lifetime if we set our heart to it. We really are what we would call as extraordinarily fortunate to have been born during this particular phase where we can come in touch with Mahaprabhu's movement and with all the arrangements that have been made. Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane nations. Only persons deprived of their intelligence by the spell of deluding energy will worship those feet with the view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you're so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. Therefore, desiring to marry a girl of like disposition, who may prove to be a veritable cow of plenty in my married life, to satisfy my lustful desire, I too have shot the filter of your lotus feet, which are the source of everything, for you are like a desire tree. This is not the action of a lustful man. He is being humble. This is not the action of a lustful man. One who is captured by lust does not have the ability to discriminate. They feel like acting upon that lust. This is not someone who has been captured by lust, where he basically wants to say that, oh, I want to fulfill my lust, and as a consequence, I'm depending on you, Krishna. No, this is not a lustful person, because he is sitting down in penance for 10,000 years. Which lustful man would sit in penance for 10,000 years trying to marry someone? Who would invest such an extraordinary amount of time wanting to engage in this activity? This is not possible. Yeah. So here there's again a display of what we would call as humility. O my Lord, you are the master and leader of all living entities. Under your direction, all conditioned souls, as if bound by rope, are constantly engaged in satisfying their desires. Following them, O embodiment of religion, I also bear oblations for you, you who are eternal time. So this is the ability to praise Krishna if he were to appear. We don't possess that. Not everybody does. However, persons who have given up stereotyped worldly affairs and beastly followers of those affairs, and who have taken shelter of the umbrella of your lotus feet by drinking the intoxicating nectar of your qualities and activities and discussions with one another, can be freed from the primary necessities of the material body. Your wheel, which has 3 naves, rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes. 13 spokes given in this verse refers to 13 months. Yeah, 13 months, basically 12 months, and then there is the concept of Adhik Mas, because you have the accumulation of an extra 30 days that are due to what we would call the concept of, we would say it's a leap year concept, but then over a certain period of time, then you have Adhik Mas occurring. You have to kind of adjust for the number of days. So 13 spokes is where he's talking about 13 months, 360 joints, 360 days, 6 rims, because there are 6 seasons. So he's referring to 6 rims, 6 seasons, 2 months each, which form an entire year. And then numberless leaves carved upon it. He's actually describing the several minuscule moments of time that are within one particular year. So he's actually describing time. So this wheel, the Sudarshana Chakra, which Krishna has in his hand, is practically time. And he's describing that particular time. Your wheel, he's using the word your wheel. It's Kala himself. My dear Lord, you alone create the universes, so personality of God. Desiring to create these universes, you create them, maintain them, and again wind them up by your own energies, which are under the control of your second energy called Yogamaya, just as a spider creates a cobweb by its own energy and again winds it up. My dear Lord, although it's not your desire, you manifest this creation of gross and subtle elements just for our sensual satisfaction. Let your costless mercy be upon us, for you have appeared before us in your eternal form, adorned with a splendid wreath of tulsi leaves. I continuously offer my respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet, of which it is worthy to take shelter, shower all benedictions on the insignificant, to give all living entities detachment from fruitive activity. By realizing you, you have expanded these material worlds by your own energy. Maitreya resumed, sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. This is verse 22. I'm going to stop here for today, and I'll take questions, and then we will continue again in the following week. Just to give a little summary before we go into Q&A, we spoke of the fact that the third canto started out with activity which is being performed for, especially in the idea of activity that is being performed by Lord Brahma, and in taking shelter of Krishna, in engaging in bringing forth the different living entities according to their propensities. And then we go into the concept of being afflicted by material energy, and the idea that someone who basically has the ability to, or rather has the duty to bring forth progeny, if they were to act irresponsibly, we saw the consequences of such irresponsible action. We saw the wonderful interaction between Lord Vishnu, the four Jaya and Vijaya, where the two events meet. Now, Lord Varaha appears. He practically resolves the problem. He resolves everything. Hiranyaksha is dispatched. Now, the second part of the third canto is focusing on the concept of what is appropriate behavior in the Grahasthashram. What is appropriate behavior and what is a responsibility in being able to bring forth progeny and being able to culture, basically bring about a culture of devotion. Here we are noticing Kardama Muni, who is so humble, even though he is extraordinarily qualified, that he's dependent on the Lord, that once he is ordered, he wants basically to go and perform penance, which is quite extraordinary because no one in our age, we would basically not be starting with going and engaging in spiritual activity before we can get married. But which is the whole purpose of brahmacharya and then grahasthashram. The idea is to be spiritually astute, and then you get very well trained, and then you come into the grahasthashram. But the concept of basically engaging in the grahasthashram and then understanding the consequences, understanding the responsibility, and then even before we engage in it, going away so that we get the necessary blessings, and then depending on Krishna. And why is he depending on Krishna? Because Kardama Muni, being a devotee, is well versed. He knows that if Krishna makes an arrangement, then that arrangement will never interfere with the ultimate goal of life. If he were to make an arrangement based on his own desire of lust, then that arrangement will interfere with material life. So he basically is fully aware. So he's very, very humble, even though he's extraordinarily powerful. He goes away in dependence, and then he performs what he knows as the prevalent system of Ashtanga Yoga, so that he could get the mercy of the Lord. And the Lord reciprocates, which is fascinating. He arranges for a girl, and he also arranges for himself to be born to them as a child, and which is practically to show what the idea and concept of dependence is. So, extraordinary chapters. So I'll stop here, and I will take questions. Then the subsequent week, we will resolve the chapter in full.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dandavad.
Hare Krishna, I can't hear you. Perhaps you could speak up a little bit.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
One moment, Mataji. Just give me a moment. This could just be me. Yeah, can you try again?
Hare Krishna.
Yes. It's a little better. Yeah.
Prabhu, I'm looking at text 18, where there's a mention about the six climates, six seasons. The seasons that I know are summer, winter, spring, and autumn. but here there's mention of 6 of them. I was wondering how it relates to the seasons that we've been taught at school.
Yeah, well, there is the whole the concept of Vasant, which is the old concept of just after winter, there is one particular season. And then, we call it, spring, right? So there is the concept of basically the Vasant season, and then there is the season that occurs just after rains. Yeah. So you have summer, winter, then you have
Autumn and spring.
Autumn, spring, and then there are 2 more.
Not that we know in the English version of dictionary.
It is not there. In the English version of dictionary, it is not there.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it works is that it is called Ritu. You see, in Sanskrit, it is called Ritu. I will write about it because I have notes and I've written it down. I'll answer this question in the group.
Okay, thank you.
It is called Ritu. Fundamentally, the idea is it occurs once in 2 months. Yeah. So even in summer, there are 2 parts to it. So there is the less hot version, and then there is the more intense version. And then rainy season is considered to be one season. Yeah. So Varsha Ritu. Yeah. So you have. Yeah.
I was wondering, are we looking at like this is India climate and in other parts of the world it's not so this thing, or is it umbrella everywhere it's the same, the 6 seasons?
I think it is basically everywhere it is the same. Basically everywhere it is the same. It is just that over the years, the quality in the particular age in yugas, the quality differs. Yeah. So there is, basically what we are looking at in the 6 ritus have to do more with winter. Then there's a pre-winter. In America, we call the October-November time frame as pre-winter. Yeah. Then you have the rainy season, and then you have pre-summer and then summer. Yeah. So there is a variation of where it shifts from being a little bit chill to moderately warm, and then it becomes intensely warm. So that's how the 6 seasons form.
Okay, I mean, I wasn't aware. This is the first time I've come across 6 seasons.
No, this is actually a very important concept where even in determining there is a whole concept. There's a whole big Shastric body of Shastric knowledge, which uses this particular principle in determining the time of birth of people who do not know when they're born, etc. In terms of they practically determine shastrically when they are born through seasonal effects and seasonal changes. The whole farmer's almanac, which is the farmer's panchang, as we would call it, is based on studying seasons. So they are very, very clear. They call it the tropical zodiac. It's basically the whole year is divided based on seasons. So there they have 6 divisions. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure.
I was wondering, similar, we have this New Year that we're celebrating today in the English calendar. And then we have another New Year, which is the Vedic New Year, where you have a calendar there and then you have a New Year there. And if you are specific to a certain state, like if you're in Chennai, there is a New Year for that. For Kerala, there is a New Year for that. I was just thinking, so many variations. What do we use? And we in our Gaudiya, this thing, we have Gaur Purnima as the New Year for us.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So much disparity. I was just trying to see some commonness here.
There is disparity, but there's also purpose. The Gujarati New Year that occurs during Diwali, during November, that New Year has to do with businessmen wanting to celebrate the financial New Year. The Gujarati New Year is a financial New Year. It is not what we would call a regular New Year. It's a financial New Year. This is the construct of, because astrology is very closely associated with this inception of New Years. The financial New Year is celebrated by the Gujaratis. In Tamil Nadu, they celebrate the New Year, which has got more to do with the harvesting season. You see, it has more got to do with the harvesting season. The English New Year, which is the New Year, which is as of today, This has no meaning whatsoever. Yeah, this has no meaning because it's an arbitrary date, because the Vedic calendar doesn't operate from the beginning of Christ. It operates from the beginning of Kali Yuga. They operate from the beginning of Kali Yuga. This one basically operates from the time of Christ and before the time of Christ and after the time of Christ. The reason why it doesn't have meaning is because it is not accounting for how time has passed from the beginning of the Yuga. So what was the day when the Yuga started? Was it Monday? Was it Tuesday? Are we really counting in that particular order from the beginning of the Yuga? Because we are not counting in that particular order from the beginning of the Yuga, we are practically taking up an arbitrary date as the first day of the year. So in one sense, today has no meaning as a new year, except that it's a calendar. So you can say basically that it's a calendar new year. So the English New Year, the Western New Year, we don't give it much importance at all. The financial New Year is what is celebrated by business people. And then you have the farmers celebrating a certain harvest season, which is a new year for them. Yeah. For the Gaudiyas, for us, the most important for us is to celebrate the appearance of Lord Gauranga. For us, it is the Gaurabda. So if at all you want to basically, sorry?
Is that the new year for us then?
Yeah, we take it as a new year. We can take it, we can in fact, take many things as a new year, but for us, the appearance of Lord Chaitanya is the new year, That is the most important day of the year for us, because for us, we want to basically submit ourselves with even greater effort on that particular day. So the year that follows is fruitful in serving Lord Gauranga's desire. We want to center ourselves around his appearance. We want to center ourselves around what he has offered to us. So does it mean that the other aspects of New Year, such as the Tamil New Year or the Keralite New Year or the Telugu New Year, etc., insignificant? No, they have their own significance from a cultural perspective. They also have significance from the perspective of practicality. There's a practical reason why it's also being done. As I mentioned, the Gujarati New Year, they are businessmen. So what is the best thing to do? It has a very technical reason for them to celebrate the New Year on that particular day. And it is very technical from the perspective of astronomy, etc. For businessmen, that's the right time to start. It's a very well chosen year to begin. For us, our existence is Lord Gauranga's service. So we use Gaurabda as the main pivotal point.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to share a realization about the roti that you mentioned. I had a similar realization when I went to Vrindavan. And, there is a lot of this. I was shocked when I went the first time because they beg a lot. People come, they ask. And I was looking at it. That's why we are saying, I asked him, why are you begging? We should be begging you. You are living in Vrindavan. You're serving and you're so blessed to be in this land. It's we who should beg you rather than you beg us. We are the beggars. And the moment I said that, he looked and he went and got some roti, Vraj roti, and with good, and immediately gave. And I was very humbled by the gesture.
Yeah, they are different here. It's the culture is different amongst the Brajvasis. They're naturally respectful of Vaishnavas and naturally recognizing the whole concept. Thank you. Okay, so let me take some questions from chat. We have deities at home and try our best to serve them, but with time, we find that the more we serve, the more we feel separation from them. What are we lacking in our sadhana that we are feeling separated even though we serve them morning and evening? This is wonderful. This is wonderful if you were to experience separation from the deities. And if you're actively serving them all the time, then you're at the same time experiencing a certain sense of separation from them. It is practically a sense that you are basically reciprocating and they are reciprocating with you. You see, because there is a great recognition of their being in your home. You're recognizing the presence, you're acting according to their desires, and then you're basically constantly meditating on their presence. So is there anything lacking? No, I wouldn't say that you're lacking in your sadhana. I think you're doing pretty well. If you are experiencing separation, even when they are present, and then you are able to basically serve them morning and evening, and you feel that you want to basically take care of them, then it's wonderful. I wouldn't really have any complaints about it. Srimati Radharani and the residents of Vrindavan, they would feel separation from Krishna if he were to just move away from them, even for a few seconds. So during the afternoon, when Krishna is with the cowherd boys, sometimes he just slips away in the afternoon to meet with Srimati Radharani and her friends. He just takes Shubal with him and he goes away. And during the time, Sri Dama and other Gopas, they will feel intense separation to the point where they will start becoming unconscious. It is Balaram who would revive them and then bring them back to consciousness so that they could continue with their service and continue with their existence. So the point being, the idea of experiencing separation while serving essentially means that we have accounted for the deities to be fully present and we are dealing with them very personally. So it is a good sign. And we don't want to feel guilty, or we do not want to feel there's any lack. What we want to do is we want to examine how we are serving them along with proper standards to ensure that we are not doing anything which is not in line. We need to continue doing what we are doing properly. And that's pretty much what is required. Is there any specific reason that the Lord has chosen Kardama Muni for the purpose of progeny, other than that the Muni is a descendant in lineage of Swayambhuva Manu? Any previous life pastime of Kardama Muni as such? Not so much that he was chosen specifically for the purpose of progeny. This is a highlighted version of how the idea of basically coming to Kardama Muni and Mother Devahuti is based on their specific behavior. This is basically to contrast what was seen with Kashyapa Muni and Mother Diti. This is the whole purpose of this particular chapter. So nothing else which is specific. So if there is such cooperation and if there's such high quality amongst the participants of the Grihastha Ashram, then Krishna himself chooses that particular family to be born. So that's being highlighted here. So that's how we need to understand this. Is there any other question or comment? Okay, so there's one more. Is anything that happens in a devotee's life cannot be understood easily? I'm sorry, I think, okay. I think Taruni, rather, you need to complete the question because it's incomplete. If you could, yeah. Is there any other question as she fills out her question? Anything else that anybody wants to ask? Okay, so your question is, my question is, anything that happens in a devotee life cannot be understood easily by us as Krishna arranges it. So this confirms with what Shastra says, that we should not judge devotees. Can you explain your question via speaking, please? I'm not able to fully understand the context.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranams. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, yes. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for today's class, Prabhuti. My question is like in Kardama Muni's life that you were explaining, right? He was austerely, he was practicing, but still he was asked to enter Grihastha ashram by Krishna. It was Krishna's arrangement. So it looks like, he's like coming into a lower ashram from an external point of view. At the same time, you were like also explaining like anything that is happening, either you start auspicious and it looks like that, but it's all under Krishna's jurisdiction. So in when Shastra also says like devotees, we cannot judge whatever they're undergoing. Sometimes even for my own self, I kind of judge like it's my own karma that I'm going through this. But there's that feeling that it might be Krishna's plan also. Why should I keep feeling so much of resentment towards myself that that I'm so so wretched like that? Sometimes I get into that kind of a feeling, Prabhuji. So I was just thinking.
Right. I think broadly speaking, whenever anything occurs in the lives of devotees, we should never forget that Krishna is involved. There is the Krishna factor. We don't want to assume that Krishna is absent from this. So sometimes, for example, we go into a temple environment, and by going into a temple environment, we might experience some distress that is coming our way, but it could be that the people who are giving distress are themselves practicing devotees. So then the question is, how do you process certain challenges that come our way while they are being given by those who are supposedly also practitioners of bhakti? So how should we process this? The idea is we should process it first by understanding that Krishna is involved. Whenever a devotee is involved, Krishna is involved. Whenever there are events that occur in a devotee's life, Krishna is involved. That should be our first step. And then we could understand what is happening and what the next steps would be. So fundamentally start with the fact that Krishna is involved, because this is basically what Krishna wants us to understand as well. Yeah. He basically wants us to understand that he is arranging everything. And then the day we understand that he is arranging everything, then he would also give us the intelligence for us to be able to navigate through life. As complicated as our life has become, the reason why our lives are complicated is because we didn't quite desire Krishna. We didn't start out life in this lifetime or the previous lifetime wanting to practice pure devotional service. We did not. So who we are today is a consolidation of experiences, desires that in many cases had nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. And then in between life that was arranged without keeping Krishna in mind, we were introduced into Krishna consciousness. Now we have to fit Krishna into something that has been created, which did not have Krishna in mind when it was created. So we struggle. So there are inefficiencies in life that we notice. And these inefficiencies themselves have a lot to do with the fact that when we arranged for life 20 years back, when we arranged for life 30 years back, we weren't really thinking that I need to arrange for life so that I could chant. We weren't really thinking I should arrange for life so that I could serve, I could associate. We arranged for life based on what we thought was appropriate, based on our peers, based on the little knowledge that we had, and then we are trying to fit Krishna in. So for most part, what we are experiencing are simply inefficiencies which have come about specifically because we didn't ask for Krishna while we arranged for life. Now, in this chapter earlier on, here's a person who has recognized the pitfall of creating a future without specifically involving Krishna. So the moment he's being asked to expand his activity in the material sphere, he's being asked to be a progenitor. He is basically being asked to beget progeny. He's being asked to get married. He hits the alarm bell and he says, I'm going to go and get myself deeply absorbed, because then Krishna will arrange for a future, and that future will not interfere with my present. So this is very important, because there's a very important lesson as to how Kardama Muni is actually arranging for his future by going away and doing his penance so that it doesn't affect anything. You see, this is very important. But our future, our present is not being arranged like that. Our present is being arranged by what we thought was appropriate because of our parentage, or because of the environment that we grew up in, the priorities that we set when we were much younger. That's who we are today. And then we are struggling to fit Krishna in, and which is a real struggle. So what do we do under these circumstances? We bring Krishna in. We always understand each and every day when we wake up that Krishna, the day has been arranged by you. You have arranged this day so that I could come closer to you. So we start the day with a meditation that this belongs to him. And when the day starts with such a meditation, then Krishna gives us intelligence to navigate the challenges and also for us to come closer. So we have an opportunity. If 20 years back, we were misled into thinking what life should be, and today we face some inefficiencies in practicing Krishna consciousness, we have an opportunity to create the next 10 years of our life. We should actively start considering that this is what I really want to do. I have been taught how to become happy. It's nonsensical for me to think otherwise. So I want to basically capture this particular concept of happiness that's been given to me by Srila Prabhupada. And I want to create a future where I'm consistent with this. So as a consequence, we start planning for a future that has ingredients which would allow us a greater level of absorption in devotional service, a greater level of absorption overall in Krishna consciousness. So this is what we need to do. This is an opportunity. This is the whole purpose of meeting together to talk about Shastra. What did we see Kardama Muni do? He created a future for himself. He created a future for himself by involving Krishna from day one. He practically made Krishna come and give him a future. And principally, when Krishna is creating a future for you, it will not interfere with Krishna consciousness. It is when we create a future for ourselves, it will interfere with Krishna consciousness because, we are body conscious. We may be conscious of so many other connections to the body. And then we think about a future that needs to accommodate all of this. It's highly inefficient. It's highly inefficient. But Kardama Muni was super smart. He practically sat down and said, okay, if I'm supposed to enter into the Grahastha ashram, if I'm supposed to get married, if I'm supposed to have children, I need to have help. This is a Mahayogi who creates an entire planet for sense gratification. We will read further. He's so powerful that he could create a planet for sense gratification. He could create an entourage of maidservants. He could create a wonderful body-changing, what I would call as a body of water, where Devahuti gets into the water, she comes out completely re-energized and beautified, and so on and so forth. He creates a spaceship by his yogic process where they could engage in sense gratification. Yeah, this is basically someone who had such capacity for creative prowess. He was a yogi. But then imagine having such powers, but yet having the good sense to understand that with all these powers, I am destructive. This requires humility. This is why this is real Trinada Pisunichena, Tarori Vasaishnula. You need to basically understand that, yes, I basically have all kinds of powers, but then these powers could electrocute me. I could be disadvantaged. So he sits down and engages in a 10,000-year penance to invoke the Lord. The Lord appears, and then the Lord is arranging for a girl. He is getting married to the girl, and they are of completely different natures, except that they are both very powerful. And then the Lord himself appears as a son. And then Kardama Muni, after all of this, walks away again from the marriage. So Devahuti practically has to tell him, please just wait until my son is born, then you could go. He waits until Kapila Muni appears, and then he leaves because the son is born, the father can go. It's a Vedic principle. Yeah. So there's a male in the family, so he leaves again to continue his penance. So this is an extraordinarily of planning for the future. So what is our opportunity? Because we don't live for 10,000 years or 15,000 years. He had the opportunity to live and do penance for 10,000 years. Our opportunity is for us to recognize what is important as of today and deeply desire just that. And then rest of life will arrange itself around this. Rest of life will just arrange itself around this particular prospect. This is what we need to do. So that's the lesson here, to involve Krishna, to bring him into our lives, and to basically accept that each and everything has been arranged by him. This is our opportunity. Create the next 20 years. Why the next 20 years? You're creating the next lifetime. Yeah, you are practically setting stage for how to enter into the womb of a woman in the next lifetime to facilitate our entry into devotional service. This is practically facilitating this. It's just very powerful. It's very powerful. It's just not to be, we don't want to take this lightly, because you practically are setting the stage for so many years in the future. That is unbelievable. You can't even imagine the scope of the activity that we are engaging in. Yeah, it is just unbelievable. There was someone who met me a couple of years back, 2019, and he was involved in some very big project here. And then I was telling him, he was from the West, very successful, very, very rich business person. I was telling him, what are the odds of you being able to build a project here in Raj? What are the odds? You're participating in eternal time. You're not participating in temporal time. You're not participating in the material calculation of time. You literally are participating in something which is eternal. So that's our case as well. We are practically plugging into something which is eternal, and we have the capacity to modify our future lifetimes, future in this lifetime. If you're very young and you're just starting out, take a heed of this lesson. Take note of what Kardama Muni did and depend on Krishna. Wanting to even enter into the Grahastha ashram, he is depending on Krishna, saying, Krishna, I want to serve you. I don't want to be distracted. And this is a very powerful person. We also want to account for that. This is not a weak person who is taking help from Krishna. This is a very powerful yogi who is taking help from Krishna, which shows that he has all the wonderful qualities of a Vaishnava. So that was the answer. There's the response, is that we always want to think Krishna is involved. We want to understand Krishna is involved, undoubtedly.
Prabhu, I was recollecting Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada used to say, pray to the deities that please protect me from Maya. And that is Srila Prabhupada. What to speak,
Yeah, that is basically how it is supposed to be. It comes naturally when a lot has been received and a lot has been realized, then it comes naturally. When nothing much has been realized and nothing much has been received, then one has a tendency to throw it away. So it's also a natural sequence of what's been given.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Begging your mercy. Today is Gandharvika's 9th birthday. So,
Hare Krishna. Everybody is growing up so fast. Hare Krishna, Gandharvika. Yeah, I've seen you as a very little girl, 5 years
3
back,
months.
I think.
Yeah,
from 3 months, yes. Yeah.
Time that
Wonderful.
he had let you. Thank you so much for all your guidance and support. So grateful to you.
Hare Krishna. Wish you the best. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Gandharvika.
Is there any other question or comment?
Prabhu,
I had one more, Prabhuji, a follow-up for your thing. Thank you so much for your detailed answer. My follow-up is that feeling that I don't want to take birth again in this material world. So that I feel like the time is so less. And then when you were telling like, yes, when we are desiring, we can, there is a lot of scope of like how we are going to, how the next 10 years or the next lifetimes, right? When I think about lifetimes, I feel like I kind of like shudder, like I don't want another lifetime. So I want, that kind of like pains me that my god, there's very less time in this lifetime, and that's how I feel.
We want to acknowledge the fact that we want to do what is necessary on a daily basis in Krishna consciousness, whilst understanding that we are dependent on Krishna for results. In Krishna consciousness, our dependence on results means that if Krishna were to bring us back, that's his prerogative. If Krishna were to take us back to Goloka, that's his prerogative. What we want to do is want an opportunity to continue devotional service. devotees basically want to go back to devotional service. And whether Krishna wants to take us back to devotional service in Goloka, does he want us to take us back in devotional service, bringing us back into the planet in different capacities? That's up to him. So we want to offer prayers in that regard. But it is good to operate on a day-to-day basis, thinking that I have to do my very best today because tomorrow may not be available. It's a good thing to do that, but we again want to do our best and leave the results to Krishna. Yeah.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Was there any other question before we close?
Prabhu, can I ask? This is more a direction question. So, on a personal, how do I? So, just to give you a context of what it was, I had gone into service to the pujari, and there was an external environment triggered some devotee, and she or he completely went out of, temper. And where I was standing, I said, I can't take this. My head was hurting. So I said, I have to leave the service and go because my head is hurting. I cannot take this. And I just left the service. I said, I can come in the evening and complete it. But in this sort of text, I can't. But as I walked out, because that's what I could do at that time, I was walking out, I was thinking, this is serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I have the opportunity to do this. And I have walked out because I said, I can't do the service. I was just thinking on reflection, how obviously I have to transcend the modes. I haven't got to that point, and I have to accept where I am in my Krishna consciousness. How do I, in future, come to some sort of, this is serving the Lord. Why would I, how else can I do this better?
Well, I think you rightly put it, that it is serving the Lord. So I think what does happen is that if there was service to do, then we focus on the service, and then interaction itself takes a second seat, which essentially means, to give an example, I've given this example several times. And this is of Mother Hladini, who was a Prabhupada disciple, who was very advanced. And she was serving in the Columbus temple. And when she was serving in the Columbus temple, she was in the kitchen, and garbage was overflowing from the bins because there was very little help. So she was trying her very best to manage the entire kitchen, the feast, and everything else, along with whatever else was required. So someone in the temple, someone who was in authority, just walked into the kitchen, and the person started yelling, saying, the garbage is just overflowing. The garbage is overflowing. And, this is abominable, this, that, and the other. And not fully accounting for everything else that is going on, which is that she is alone, she's trying to complete the feast, etc., or not picking up the garbage himself. He just yelled and then walked away. So the way she processed the event was, she simply understood that Krishna was wanting her to clear the garbage. So she was able to kind of cut the main message into what is the best and most efficient way to do service. So she said, someone came and shouted that the garbage has to be cleared up. Essentially means Krishna is wanting me to clear the garbage. So she clears the garbage and continues with her work. So we need to develop that particular, what I would call as ability to be able to focus on what is the most important message that is coming through in an environment where the Lord is present as the deity, and someone is coming and he's shouting, he's yelling, and whatever.
But
so what is the message that he's conveying?
It wasn't in context to me. It was just that they had a bad day, the flowers didn't arrive, the driver got delayed, and as a consequence, all the service got delayed. And I just happened to be there in that environment as a download. So it was not direct to me, but it was too much for me that I said, I can't take this. I'll come later. But I did come out of the service, and I felt really bad. I am serving the Lord.
Yeah, which is what I'm saying, is that in general, coming out of service shouldn't be done in such circumstances. We need to basically find a way for us to be able to accomplish a service.
How do we do that, Prabhu? What do we do? What do we tell ourselves?
Well, basically, it's not so much a matter of telling yourself. You could take some time off and then chant for some time and then come back to service. You could basically recenter yourself. You could randomly offer a prayer to the deities saying, whatever is happening here may not allow me to serve you properly. Therefore, I'm more dependent on you than even before. So you depend more on the deities. So there are a few things that you could do to center yourself, is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay. Now I got it. Now I got it.
Yeah.
Thank
Sure.
you. Appreciate that.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Very well.
All right. So I guess with that, if there aren't any more questions, then we will end the session. Thank you for joining us. We'll conclude this chapter in the subsequent week, and we'll meet again. Hare Krishna, and wish everyone a very happy, prosperous, Krishna conscious new year to come, and many years to come of service and surrender to Krishna, to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.